Welcome to Celtic Medicine Stories, a podcast where we explore stories from the old Celtic lands, with the understanding that they carry medicine for us. I'm your host, Kat Horton, and I offer these stories in the spirit of the oral storytelling tradition of the British Isles. That is, they are free and they're open to everyone, always. Although these stories often have come from another time and have evolved through time with the oral storytelling tradition, they are here still for a reason. If you're curious about going deeper with this story, with the images, symbols, characters, landscapes, sounds, whatever it is that's speaking to you from this particular story, then there are some free resources below which will help guide you in that process. This story, The Dream Makers, comes from the Isle of Skye in the west of Scotland, a beautiful island full of mountains and mystery. This is one of those stories that comes across as a simple folktale but carries some really deep medicine from the realm of dreams. It speaks to me of how the Otherworld erupts into this world through our dreaming and the importance of attending to its messages. Like so many other Celtic tales, it reminds us that the Otherworld is ever present and we may stumble across its threshold both awake and asleep. I'm working on a retelling of this story, but this version I'm sharing here today is the way it's traditionally told by Scottish storytellers. I hope you enjoy it. So as you listen to this story, as with all these Celtic medicine stories, let yourself float. You don't need to pay attention in the way maybe you were asked to do in school. You don't need to try and follow the plot line or the dialogue or anything in particular. In fact, the medicine lies in what you find yourself attending to. So when you let yourself go into that receptive, floaty state and you find your mind wanting to savor an image or a sound or a word, and you find yourself more engaged with that than whatever it is that I'm saying, then notice that. You don't need to analyze it or try and figure it out in that moment, but just notice it, that called your attention, because that's where the medicine lies. Wherever this story interacts with your story is what you're looking for. And I believe this is part of why these stories have been around for so long, is because they each interact with us in some special way. And so as you listen, just let yourself absorb it and notice which parts stick out to you. And travel with me, if you will, out into this island, far out in the sea on the western edge of the world. Out to the very, very edge where the land touches the sea, where the seas touches the sky. Right to that between place. It's not quite land, it's not quite sea, but there huddled against the rocks is a little village. This little village is little houses made of stone, all packed tightly, made of stone, and covered in thatched roof, held tightly again with ropes holding it down against the wind. And it's packed so tightly that you can cut the ends of it, and it forms this perfect edge so the water drops off. It doesn't hit the house. This little village has been huddled on the edge of this sea for who knows how long, and it's holding on there. But there's no need to huddle up against the storm on this night, because this is a morning in early summer. And the young lassies of the village are very excited. There's a lot of twittering and fluttering around because this is the day that they get to go and collect blueberries. And this only happens once a year when the blueberries are in season. And this is the day, and the grannies and the aunties tell them when it's the time. And they told them the night before, tomorrow you're going, so gather your baskets. And so they gather their creels, their baskets that they've made out of sea grasses. They probably spent the winter patching them up and making them. And some of these girls have been on this adventure before. They're the older ones, and some of them are new to this whole adventure of blueberry picking. And off they go just after sunrise. And they wrap up some snacks, some bread, some cheese, and a hanky, put it in their basket, and they head out up the little rocky trail that goes up out of the beach, climbing up the side of the cliff onto the moors. These moors are just in the shadow of the Cullen Mountains, which are very special mountains, but they're also mountains that are forbidden. They don't go up in the mountains, but they can go up in the moors at the bottom of the mountains, and that's where all the good blueberry picking is anyway. So they head up there with their baskets, excited to see what they can find. All the heather at their feet, not quite blooming yet, but the blueberries are ready. The grannies were right. And they know the grannies have told them all the reasons they collect these blueberries, all the medicine that is in them, and that they'll dry them and keep them for the winter and make teas out of them, and to help people who have a fever or a sore throat. This blueberry is really good medicine, and it's delicious, juicy fruit. They like to add it to their porridge and their bannocks and their breads. So it's a beautiful day. It's not raining. That's amazing. It's a beautiful day. The sun is out. The clouds are blowing gently overhead. And this group of lassies just keep wandering. They keep picking blueberries and throwing them up in their basket. And there's one young lassie. This is not the first time she's been out on this adventure, and she is determined to get the biggest basket full of blueberries that she can get. And she wants to get the biggest, fattest, juiciest ones. And so she just keeps looking. Oh, there's the next one. There's the next one. There's the next one. She's totally in the zone, just following all these little blueberry bushes up and up and up the little windy trail. And the girls are singing to each other. That's part of how they keep in touch with each other, singing songs, singing to the blueberries. And at some point, this young one realizes that she can't hear the other girls singing anymore. And so she stands up and kind of looks around to try and orient herself. Where did everybody go? And she realizes that a fog has come in and she can't actually see anything. She certainly can't see any of her friends. It's gotten very foggy. And she looks down at the terrain she's standing on and realizes that she's not on a path anymore. And she seems to be in the mountains. She's not in the moors. She's in the mountains. She doesn't quite know what to do. And then she's peering into the fog, wondering how it got so foggy so quickly. She sees some eyes. And she realizes that attached to the eyes, just above, are some ears. She keeps looking around. What is this? And there's more. There's more eyes and ears and more eyes and ears. And they're all looking at her. And they're coming through the fog. At some point, she realizes that it's a whole herd of deer. Hinds, female deer with their young ones at foot. They see her. And they stop and look at her, and she looks at them. She's not sure what to do. But one of them walks up to her and just sort of gently nudges her on the elbow, just nudges her with their nose, and sort of pushes her in this direction. She doesn't know which direction it is. She's totally disoriented. But as she sees all the other deer starting to move in the same direction, they're all going in one way. She doesn't know what else to do but follow them. I mean, she might as well, right? So she walks with the herd of deer through the fog, across some pretty rocky terrain, and it's definitely steep. They're definitely in the mountains. They're going up a little bit. And they walk for some time. She's really lost track of time and where she is. And eventually they come to another edge. This time it seems to be the edge of a cave. And the fog is starting to clear a little bit. She peers towards the edge of this cave. It's very dark inside. But as she peers in, her eyes adjust. She sees that within this cave, there seems to be two people, an old man and an old woman. And they're sitting right on the edge of the cave inside. And they seem to be staring at the ground. She wonders if they're still alive. They're very still. And as her eyes adjust a little more, she realizes that they're not staring at the ground. They're staring at a pool of water in the cave floor. And one of the deer gently nudges her again and seems to be telling her to cross that threshold out of the mountain and into the cave. So she might as well, right at this point. What else is she going to do? So she crosses in to the cave. The old woman looks up at her and smiles. Says, we've been expecting you. We're glad you're here. And the young girl says, oh, thank you very much. That's nice. But I really just want to go home. Can you tell me how to get home? And the old lady looked at her. And she said, indeed, we will. We will tell you how to get home, but But first, we'd like some help. We really need some help here. And so we're going to ask you to stay for a year and a day and help us. And then we'll tell you how to get home. And so at this point, she's like, well, okay, all right, let's do it. What do you need help with? And the old lady said, well, we'll find out in the morning. Let's go to sleep now. And so in the morning, the old lady woke up with the sun and took her out wandering up in the mountains and collecting herbs and showing her which ones they needed to pick and which ones they needed to put in the basket and telling her the names of them and telling her the stories of each one. And they did this every day. They went out and gathered herbs in the morning, and then they'd come back. And then the next thing to do was to milk the deer. So all the deer came into the cave and they stood still, and the old woman and the young girl milked the deer, and they gathered all that milk. And then the next step in the process was to make the cheese. So they took the herbs and they added some of those to the milk and then gave some to the deer to eat. And then out of the milk, they made the cheese. She didn't know what they were doing with this cheese, but they were making cheese, buckets and buckets and buckets of it. And then as the day wore on and into the afternoon, they'd take the cheese over to the old man who was still sitting by the pool, still staring into the pool. And then they'd sit for a long time staring into the pool. And they told her, this is the pool that reflects all of the world. And as dusk fell, they would take the cheese in their hands and shape it into little figures, into symbols, to birds and animals and trees and all sorts of different things. And they put them back in different buckets. And just after nightfall, the old man would gather up the cheese and he'd go out and stand right on the edge of the cliff, overlooking the sea. And in his right hand, he'd hold up one of these little cheese figures and he'd call. And out of the sky would fly the falcons and the eagles and the ospreys and the seagulls, these beautiful seabirds. And they would grasp in their talons these cheese figures and they'd fly off. And they told her these were the dreams. They were sending the dreams to the people. And these dreams that he held in his right hand were the dreams to follow. These were the dreams of truth, dreams of beauty and generosity and love and companionship and community and inspiration and all the things that we can follow in our dreams. And in his left hand, he'd hold a different set of little cheese figures. He'd hold them up in the air and he'd call. And out of the cracks in the cliff below him would come the ravens and the crows. And they would grab onto these cheese pieces out of his left hand and they'd fly off croaking. Wah! And he told her, these are the dreams that mislead. These are the dreams of anger and envy and revenge. And so this went on every day and every night. She would out there. Eventually the old woman let her go do it on her own, go gather the herbs and milk the deer, make the cheese so that she could get a bit of a rest for a while. But every evening they'd sit by the pool and look at the whole world reflected there, and the old man and the old woman would shape the dreams and send them out. And then one morning as she woke up and she was getting ready to gather her basket and go out and get more herbs, the old woman said to her, you've been here a year and a day, and we thank you for this work, this service. And today is the day you're going to go home. Oh, she was taken by surprise. She'd lost track of time. She'd been quite enjoying the work up here, but she also liked the idea of going home. So she said, okay, thank you. And they gave each other a hug. She hugged the old man, and the old woman said to her, the deer will take you. Just follow the deer. And so off she went with the group of deer that she'd become very familiar with. And they walked with her down the little stone pathways and winding around until eventually she got to a place where she's like, oh, I know where I am. I know this path. I know I can go on myself. I'm going to go this way towards the village. And the deer gently nudged her in the other way. They nudged her further north up the shore. And she was like, no, but the village is down there. And they just nudged her. And she learned to trust the deer, so she followed them. And they took her further away from the village up north, up the coast a little bit. And they stood there on the coast looking out into the sea. A little bit of time, she started to notice something coming across the sea towards them. As it came closer, she realized it was a little boat made of skin. It was being rowed by just one person. And as it came closer and closer, she started to see it was a young man. And his blonde hair. He was wearing a golden toque and a very fine tunic. And she watched him. As he got closer and closer, she thought, he's very handsome. I wonder why he's coming to this island. And as he got to right up onto the beach, he pulled his boat out and he jumped out. And he came right up to her and he put out his hand. And he said, "My love, I have been dreaming about you for a year and a day. And here you are. And the dreams told me to come, that I would find you here on this beach. And here you are. And I come to ask you, as the dreams told me, to come back with me, to marry me, to be the queen of my land, and teach the people about dreaming, because this is a skill that is being lost, and we need you." And she looked back at the deer and she said, "Thank you." And she took his hand and she climbed into the little boat. And off they went. And it is said indeed that she did go and live with him, and she was the queen of that land. And she did indeed teach the people many, many things about dreaming. Thank you for listening to this episode of Celtic Medicine Stories. If you want to go deeper, check out my Working with Archetypes free email course. There's a link somewhere in these notes. You'll find it. And feel free to visit on my website, kathoughton.com, KATHOUGHTON.com. I'd love to hear from you. Go well.